First time the choir walked past Cora close enough to touch, she was so frightened she forgot to exist. She had pressed herself into the gap between the stairwell and the dead elevator shaft, knees drawn up, both hands clamped over her own mouth, as if her breath were a thing that could be confiscated. Came down the corridor on 6 legs that did not so much step as resolve, each foot finding the floor a half-second before it seemed to move, the way a chord finds the note under it. It was taller than the doorways. It had to fold to pass them. Where its head should have been there was an arrangement of tuned plates that turned and turned, drinking the room, and she understood with the whole animal certainty of her body that if it found her, it would unmake her without hurrying. The way you might step on something in the dark and only later wonder what it had been. It stopped a meter from her. The plates turned. One of them swung toward her hiding place and held there, and Cora felt the air go thin. Felt the particular silence that comes just before a held breath becomes a scream. And she thought, with the flat clarity that terror sometimes hands you like a gift, this is the moment I die. And the hunter moved on. The way a thing moves on when it has decided you are beneath its notice. She knew that movement. She had been receiving it her whole life, from teachers and lovers and the men at the relief stations, who looked at the person behind her in the queue. This was different. The hunter moved on the way you move on, past an empty chair. There had been no decision in it at all. It had swept the corridor with whatever it used for eyes, and the corridor had been empty. And she had been the empty part. She stayed in the gap for 4 hours after it was gone, and somewhere in the 3rd hour, when the shaking finally let go of her, she stopped telling herself she had been lucky and started, very slowly, to be afraid of something new, because she had felt it happen. In the instant the plate swung toward her, she had felt herself thin, felt the edges of her go soft and uncertain, felt some essential weight drain out of her until she was less present in the world than the dust on the stairs. She had assumed, the way you assume your heart will keep beating, that she was a solid fact. She had just learned she was not. She was a fact only sometimes. And the times she was least a fact were exactly the times she was most afraid. The city had fallen in 11 days, which the people who survived it would later agree was both impossibly fast and somehow not fast enough to spare anyone the watching. The choir did not bombard. That was the thing nobody had been prepared for. Humanity had built its nightmares around fire from the sky, around the clean arithmetic of overwhelming force, and instead the choir had come down in their slow resolving way and simply begun to attend to the cities, and the people in them had started to come apart. Not violently. That was the obscenity of it. A man would be crossing a plaza, and a hunter would attend to him, and he would slow and stop and stand very straight as if remembering something, and then he would thin, the way Cora had thinned in the stairwell, except he did not stop thinning. He would grow faint at the edges. The light would start to pass through him. And then he would be a smear of warmth on the cold air, and then he would be nothing, and the hunter would already be attending to the next one. Survivors learned the rules, the way survivors always learn rules, which is to say by losing the people who broke them first. You did not run. Running drew their attention was the way a struck bell draws the ear, and the ones who ran went faint and went out before they reached the corner. You did not fight. The ones who fought shone like lanterns to the hunters, were the easiest of all to attend to, came apart with their weapons still warm in their hands. You did not stand your ground and refuse to be afraid, which was the advice the brave gave each other in the first days, and the brave were the first to go, every one of them, because the brave were certain, and certainty was the thing the choir could hear. What you did, if you wanted to keep existing, was you got small inside yourself. You doubted. You let the fear in and you let it hollow you out, and you became the empty chair, the dust on the stair, the part of the room that the turning plates swept across and found nothing in. The people who survived the 11 days were not the strong ones. Cora would think about this for the rest of her life. They were the anxious, the uncertain, the ones who had spent their whole lives not quite sure they were allowed to take up space. The occupation had come and it had killed the confident and spared the frightened, and it had done it so precisely that, for a long time, nobody understood it was happening at all. There had been a man on Cora's stair before. The 11 days, a retired ferry pilot named Dunn, who fixed everyone's plumbing for the price of being listened to. And Dunn had been the bravest person Cora had ever known in the small daily way that has nothing to do with wars. When the choir came, he had stood in the mouth of their building with a length of pipe in his fist and told the children behind him that nobody was getting past him, and he had believed it. You could hear that he believed it. His voice had rung off the stairwell walls with the clean certainty of a man who had decided. Cora, faint with terror, 2 flights up, had watched the hunter resolve out of the gray at the end of the street and turn toward the building and find, in all that frightened silence, the one bright ringing thing. It had attended to Dunn the way you attend to a single candle in a dark house. He had stood very straight. He had stopped believing, near the end. She had seen the doubt arrive in his face a half-second, too late to save him, seen him understand, and the understanding had not made him fainter. It had been the certainty that killed him, the deciding, the standing in the mouth of the door. Children behind him lived. They lived because they were screaming, because they were sure of nothing but their own small terror. And the hunter swept across them and found the building empty of anything worth attending to and moved on. Cora had thought about that for 3 weeks in the flooded basements. The brave man died, and the frightened children lived, and there was a lesson in it that the whole of human history had taught backwards. Cora had spent 30 years being the kind of person rooms forgot. She had been the quiet one at the table, the one whose stories got talked over, the one who left parties without anyone noticing the door. She had taken it all those years as a verdict on her worth. It turned out to have been a rehearsal. They found her because she was good at not being found, which was its own kind of signal if you knew how to listen for the silence. She had been 3 weeks in the dead districts, living off the cans in flooded basements, when a hand closed around her wrist in the dark, and a voice she would come to know better than her own mother's said, very low, "Don't get brave. You'll go out, and I'll lose you." The cell lived under a drowned tram station, behind a wall of silt and a habit of being unremarkable so total that Cora walked past the entrance twice before the hand pulled her through. There were maybe 40 of them. They moved through their tunnels with a strange downcast economy, never quite meeting your eye, and at first Cora took it for despair and then understood it was discipline. To meet someone's eye is to assert that you are both there. These people had learned not to assert anything. The woman who ran the cell was called Rosa, and Cora could never afterward say how old she was. She had the face of someone in her 60s, and the stillness of someone much older, and a way of being in a room that made the room feel borrowed. She sat with her hands folded and listened to Cora's story of the stairwell, with her head slightly tilted. And when Cora got to the part about feeling herself thin, Rosa smiled for the first time, a small private smile, and said, "There you are. There I'm what? You felt it. Most people who can do it never feel it. They just keep dying somewhere down the line because they don't know what they did the time they lived." Rosa unfolded her hands. "You felt yourself go. That means you can learn to come back." "Come back to what?" "To being seen." Rosa said it the way another person might say, to breathing underwater, a thing the body screamed against, a thing that should not be survivable. Anyone can disappear, child. You did it scared, in a stairwell, with no idea what you were doing. Disappearing is just fear with the brakes off. We don't teach disappearing. Teach the hard thing. She leaned forward. We teach you how to choose to be there. How to walk into the one places in the universe where the thing that ate your city is looking, and stand in front of it, and let it see you, on the exact half-second you decide, and not one moment before. That's what we are. We are the people who learned how to be afraid and show up anyway. Cora said she didn't understand how that was a weapon. "It's the only weapon," Rosa said. "Think about what they can hear. They hear conviction. They hear a mind that's sure of itself ring out like a struck glass, and they find it, and they reach into it, and they switch it off. Their whole war runs on the fact that anything dangerous to them has to be sure of itself first. A soldier has to believe he can fire before he fires. A bomber has to commit to the run. They built a hunt around the idea that everything with teeth announces itself." She spread her hands. "Then they came to us, and we are the species that doubts. We are the only animal in creation that can want a thing with its whole heart and not be sure it deserves to have it. We can be terrified and still walk forward. They have no concept for it. To them, a frightened thing has already left the field. They cannot imagine. The frightened thing is still coming. The training nearly broke her, because the training was the opposite of everything the 11 days had taught her body to survive. It began with the candle. Rosa would set a stub of fat lamp on the floor of the deep chamber and tell Cora to make it gutter, not by blowing on it, but by being there hard enough that the air noticed for days. Cora could do nothing. She would screw her face up and clench her fists, and the flame would burn on, serene, indifferent, and every failure made it worse. Because the harder she tried, the more she doubted, and the more she doubted, the fainter she got, until Rosa would say, gently, "Cora, I can see the wall through your hand. You're doing the easy thing again. Stop running." The first time she made the candle gutter, she did it by accident, thinking of her mother. Her mother had hummed. That was the thing Cora's body remembered before her mind could find the words for it. A tune with no name that her mother had hummed while she worked, while she paid the bills that did not balance, while she sat up the nights Cora was sick. A low four-note thing that went up and came back down and resolved into something that felt, even now, like a hand on the back of the neck. Lila. Her mother's name had been Lila, and Lila's mother had been Vesna, who had hummed it too, and Vesna's mother before her, back along a line of women that Cora had never thought about as a line, because each of them had been, in her family's telling, so unremarkable. Women who married quietly, and worked quietly, and were buried with small turnouts. Women who, Cora suddenly understood there on the floor of the deep chamber, with the candle steady in front of her, had perhaps not been unremarkable at all. Had perhaps been so good at not being remarked upon that they had walked through wars and famines and the ordinary daily violence of being a woman who took up no space and survived all of it, and passed the surviving down the line in a four-note tune. They did not know they were teaching. Cora hummed it, without deciding to. And as the tune came up and came back down and resolved, she felt herself land, felt the weight pour back into her, felt herself become an undeniable fact in the world. And the candle flame bent away from her as if she had become a presence the very air had to make room for, and guttered, and nearly went out. Rosa, watching from the dark, let out a long breath. "Your mother," she said. It wasn't a question. How did you? It's always the mothers. Rosa came and crouched by the candle, and her old face in the small light was doing something complicated. "It runs in the lines, this thing. Down the women, mostly. I don't know why, and I've stopped asking. But I've trained 60 of you now, and every single one found the door the same way you just did. They reach for the person who taught them they were real, before the world. Taught them they weren't. Most of you, it's a mother, a grandmother, someone who hummed." She touched the floor near the flame. "They came here thinking we were prey, Cora. Thief. They've been at war with humanity for a year, and they still think they're at war with prey. They have no idea that what they're actually fighting is 5,000 years of women who refused to disappear all the way." After the candle came the harder lesson, which was a person. Rosa would sit on the floor of the deep chamber an arm's length away and tell Cora to be seen by her. Not to make a candle gutter, not to bend the indifferent air, but to walk into the attention of another human being and let herself be a fact in their eyes. Should have been the easy version. It was the hardest thing of all. The candle did not have an opinion about whether Cora deserved to take up space. Rosa did, or seemed to, in the patient, unblinking way she watched. And the moment Cora reached for the weight of herself under that gaze, she would feel the old verdict rise up. "Who are you to be looked at? Who told you you were worth the room?" And she would thin, and Rosa would say nothing, would just keep watching the place where Cora had been with that same unhurried patience, until Cora wanted to scream at her, except that screaming would have required being there. They built their whole war on this. Rosa said one night, when Cora had failed for the 9th time, and was sitting in the dark with her face in her hands, solid only because she was too tired to disappear. Not on the spires. On the fact that we were all taught, somewhere, by someone, that we weren't worth attending to. They didn't have to invent that weapon, child. We'd been carrying it for them for 5,000 years. Every woman who learned to make herself small at a table. Every quiet one who let the room forget them. They came down out of the sky expecting to do the work of making us doubt ourselves. And they found the work already done. She reached out, in the dark, and took Cora's wrist, the way she had, the night they met. That's the part I can't forgive them for. Not the killing. The killing's just what they are. It's that they looked at the worst thing the world ever did to us. Taught us we were nothing, and they tried to use it to finish us. Her grip tightened. So, we're going to take it back. Going to take the exact thing they meant to kill us with, and we're going to make it the thing they can't survive. You were never nothing, Cora. You were just very, very good at the thing your whole life was secretly training you for. Now be seen. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Be seen. And Cora, exhausted with the old verdict howling in her, hummed the forn and looked up and let Rosa see her. Let an old woman in a drowned tram station look at the whole undeniable terrified fact of her. And Rosa's eyes filled, and she nodded once and said, "There. That's the thing they're afraid of. That right there. They just don't know it yet." She learned the lineage in pieces on nights like that one. Rosa's people kept the names the way other people kept relics. Down each line, the women who had come back. Rosa had a great-grandmother who had walked out of a burning city in another century so faint that the soldiers at the cordon counted the road empty, and who had become solid again on the far side, only because there was a baby on her hip who needed her to be a person. Cora had Leela and Vesna, and the woman before Vesna whose name was lost, and back beyond that into a fog of quiet women who had every one of them, on some frightened ordinary night, chosen to come back. None of them had known what they were. They had thought they were timid. They had thought the world's verdict was the truth. And all the while they had been passing down, mother to daughter in a four-note tune, the one inheritance that would matter when the singing thing came down out of the sky. Not courage, which the choir could hear and silence, but the stranger and more stubborn thing, the thing that had no name in any language the choir knew, the habit of coming back. The choir had raised 7 of them across the captured world, and they were not weapons in any shape humanity had a word for. They were perception-made architecture. A single hunter could attend to a plaza, a spire could attend to a city, could fill every street and stairwell and basement with its turning awareness, could find every mind certain enough to find, until the only humans left alive under its shadow were the ones too frightened or too broken to ring. The districts around the spire were the quietest places on Earth. Nothing certain lived there. The spire had made a desert, and the survivors called it peace. The cell's plan was older than Cora, and most of the people who had drafted it were dead. You could not destroy a spire from outside. It would attend to the demolition team before they cleared the perimeter, sweep the certainty out of them, leave their charges unset in their faint dissolving hands. You could not destroy it with a bomb on a timer, because the spire could hear the conviction in a primed device, the way it heard the conviction in a mind, and it would reach into the firing circuit and quiet it. The only thing the spire could not hear was a frightened human walking very slowly toward its heart, doubting every step, faint as breath on glass. And the only thing that human had to do, once she reached the resonance core at the center, was to stop being frightened for exactly as long as it took to set the charge and arm it, and hold the conviction of it steady against the spire's reaching. For the 4 seconds the circuit needed to commit, 4 seconds of being absolutely sure, in the one place in the world most attuned to hearing it. 4 seconds, standing in front of the singing thing, letting it see you. It will reach for you the instant you ring, Rosa told her the night before. They were sitting in the deep chamber, and Rosa had brought out a bottle of something, an amber that the cell kept for sending people off, and she poured 2 fingers each into tin cups, and they passed the bottle back and forth between them in the small light. The very instant. Feel it find you. It's like a hand closing around your spine, and every cell in your body is going to scream at you to go faint, to do the easy thing, to run inside yourself where it can't follow. That scream is the thing that kept you alive in the stairwell. Tomorrow it's the thing that'll kill you. You have to override the only instinct that ever saved your life. You have to hold the conviction while it's reaching into you to switch it off. 4 seconds. She turned her cup in her fingers. I won't lie to you about what happens if you go faint at the wrong moment, with the spire's full attention on you. You won't come back from that one. There's a thinness you don't come back from. You've seen it. I've sent 11 people to the spires, Rosa said. 3 armed the charge. 2 of those came home. She drank. I'm not telling you that to frighten you. Frighten's fine. Frighten's the job. Telling you so, you know, that whatever happens tomorrow, I knew the price when I poured this. She refilled Cora's cup without being asked. Hum the tune. When the hand closes on your spine and you feel yourself starting to go, hum your mother's tune. It won't make you brave. There's no such thing as brave. That's a story the certain tell themselves right up until the moment they go out. It'll just give you something to hold that isn't the fear. 4 notes, up and back down. Long enough to be sure. She went in at the gray hour, faint as a rumor, into the desert the spire had made. Crossing the dead districts was the easy part and the worst part. Easy, because there was nothing certain in her to hear. She had spent 3 weeks getting good at being the empty chair, and the habit took her now like a current. Worst, because the empty districts were full of the people. The spire had not quite finished. Survivors gone so faint with terror that they had stopped being able to come back, sitting in doorways and on curbs translucent, looking at their own hands. She passed an old man she could see the railing through. She passed a child curled on a step who turned her almost face toward Cora's almost presence, with an expression of such faded hope that Cora nearly stopped, nearly turned solid right there in the open out of pure animal pity, which would have rung out across the whole district and ended everything. That's how they get you, Rosa had warned her. Not the fear, the kindness. Kindness is a kind of certainty. You'll want to be there for someone, and being there is exactly the thing that kills you. So Cora went faint past the faded child, hating herself, holding the 4 notes silent behind her teeth. And the worst part of the worst part was knowing the child had seen her go. The spire's outer halls were a forest of the turning plates, grown out of the floor and the walls and the impossible ceiling. All of them tuned and listening, and walking through them was like walking through a held breath that lasted an hour. Twice a hunter resolved out of the architecture and attended to the hall she was standing in. And both times she did the thing that should have been impossible, and made herself less. Let the doubt in deeper, let go of the very idea that she had a right to exist. Became so uncertain of her own reality that the turning plates swept across her, and found, correctly, that the hall was empty. The second time she was so faint that she lost the feeling in her hands, and could not be sure for a stretch of seconds that had no bottom, whether she was still walking, or had simply dissolved into the held breath of the place, and was now only the spire's memory of a woman who had once intended to come here. She found the 4 notes. She did not hum them. She could not have risked the sound, but she shaped them with the inside of her mind. Up and over, and down, and home. T in the shaping was a thread, and she followed the thread back to the fact of her own feet, and she kept walking. The core was a chamber at the center of the singing, and the song there was so total that it was almost silence again. The way the loudest sound and no sound at all both leave you deaf. The resonance core hung in the middle of it, a slow-turning lattice the color of the inside of a shell, and standing in front of it, attending to it the way a person tends a fire, was the conductor. She had not been told there would be a conductor. It was a choir, but old. Its plates were scored and dull. Its 6 legs moved with a slow deliberation that was almost gentleness, and it stood before the core in an attitude that Cora's exhausted, faded mind could only read as love. It was not a guard. Nothing about it was set to fight. It was simply with the spire, the way Rosa was with the cell, an old thing tending a thing it had given its life to. And as Cora hung at the edge of the chamber, faint as a draft, she understood that the conductor was not listening for intruders the way the hunters listened. It was listening into the core, conducting it, lost in the work, and it had not heard her because there was nothing to hear, because she had made herself into nothing so thoroughly that she was no longer certain, in any way that mattered, that she had ever been a person named Cora at all. Which was the problem. She had come all this way by becoming nothing, and now the job required her to become something. and she had gotten so good at the becoming nothing that she could no longer find the door back. She stood at the edge of the chamber, with the charge in her faint hands, and she reached for the weight of herself, reached for the solid fact of Cora, and there was nothing there to grab. She had dissolved herself one increment too far. She was a draft, a rumor, a held note with no instrument left to play it. This is the thinness you don't come back from. She thought, in a voice that was already barely hers, and felt the last of her edges start to give. Felt herself beginning to belong to the spire's long breath. Felt the great soft easy dissolving that the faded people in the doorways had not come back from, and it did not even hurt. That was the terrible mercy of it. It was the easiest thing in the world. It was just letting go of a weight she had never been sure she had the right to carry anyway. She reached for her mother. Not the tune. There was no mouth left to hum it, no mind left to shape it. She reached past the tune, down the line, down the unremarked upon women, and she found Lila. Lila up the night Cora had the fever. Lila's hand on the back of her neck, the hand that said, "You are real, you are here. You take up space in the world, and the world will make room." And she found Vesna behind by Lila, and behind Vesna a woman whose name Cora had never been told, and behind her another, 5 generations of women who had survived by going faint, and had every one of them come back. Come back to hum the tune one more night. Come back because there was a child to sit up with, because there was a bill to pay, because being nothing was easy, and they had chosen, every single one of them, on 1,000 ordinary frightened nights, the harder thing. They said, all of them, in the 4-note tune. Come back. We always came back. That's the whole secret. We were never brave. We just came back. Cora came back. The weight poured into her so hard it was an act of violence. She slammed into the fact of her own body like a diver hitting water from too high, and the world snapped solid around her, the cold floor real under her real feet, the charge heavy and certain in her 2 solid hands, and she rang out across the chamber like a struck bell, like a lantern lit in a dark room, like the loudest sound a frightened thing has ever made. And the conductor turned. It turned with the slow love of a thing interrupted at its life's work, and its scored plates swung toward her, and she felt the hand close around her spine, the reaching, the cold attentive pressure of a mind that intended, without any malice, the way you blow out a candle, to switch her off. She felt herself begin to thin under it. The instinct screamed, go faint, do the easy thing. You know how, you've always known how. She hummed her mother's tune out loud. It was a small sound in that vast singing chamber. A 4-note human nothing against the architecture of a god. Up and over and down and home. And it was hers. It had always been hers. It had come down 5 generations of women to be in her mouth in this exact second. And she held the conviction of it. I am here. I am real. I take up space, and the world will make room. And she set the charge against the slow-turning lattice of the core, and she armed it. And the conductor reached deeper into her to quiet the certainty it could hear, and could not find the bottom of it because she was not certain she would live. She was not certain she was right. She was not certain of anything except the 4 notes in the hand on the back of her neck across 30 years and 5 generations. And that one small, uncertain human song was the one frequency in all of creation that the choir had no instrument to silence, because it was not the sound of conviction at all. It was the sound of someone afraid who had come back anyway. The circuit needed 4 seconds. She gave it 4 seconds. She stood in front of the singing thing and let it see her, all of her, the whole undeniable, terrified fact of her, and she counted them in her mother's tune. Up T1, over, 2, down, T3, and on the 4th note, home, T the charge committed, and the conductor's reaching turned at last from quieting to something that, in a creature that had never in its long life had cause to learn the shape of it, looked very much like surprise. 2 cells away, and a city to the south, Rosa felt the spire stop singing the way you feel a clock stop in a house you've lived in all your life. By the silence where the sound had been, she was sitting as deep in the deep with the amber bottle and 2 tin cups, one of them full, the way she always sat, the morning after she sent someone to aspire, and when the silence rolled in over the city, she closed her eyes and let it move through her. 40 people in the tunnels around her had felt it too, and one by one they stopped what they were doing, and went still, downcast, in the discipline that was also a kind of prayer. The southern spire was gone. The desert it had made would green over. The faded people in the doorways who could still come back would, over the next days and weeks, find the weight pouring back into their hands, would become facts again, would be there for someone, and the ones too far gone would at least no longer have the singing to hold them faint. 6 spires left. 6. It was not a victory in any shape the certain would recognize. It was one frightened woman and 4 seconds and a 4-note tune against a war that had eaten the world. But Rosa had been doing this long enough to know that this was the only shape victory had ever come in for people like hers. Small and quiet, and passed hand to hand down the lines, and added up over time into something the strong could not imagine and could not stop. She did not know yet whether Cora had come home. The 2 cups sat in front of her. She would know by nightfall when the survivors of the run came in through the silt wall one at a time, or did not. She poured nothing more and waited, and after a while, without deciding to, she began to hum, a low 4-note thing that went up and came back down and resolved into something like a hand on the back of the neck, a tune she had learned from her own mother in another century. The tune that every one of her people seemed to find their way back through, as if it had been waiting in the species the whole time for the war that would need it. Cora came home at nightfall, faint as a rumor and solid as anyone alive, and she came in through the silt wall on her own 2 feet. She had walked out of the dying spire, through halls that had stopped turning, past hunters that wandered the resonance-deaf chambers in slow confusion, no longer able to find the certainty they had been built to hunt, because the thing that fed them certainty had gone quiet forever. She had passed the faded child in the doorway, and this time she had stopped. She had crouched down in the open street, solid, undeniable, a fact in the world, and she had taken the child's almost hand in her real one, and she had hummed the 4 notes, until she felt the weight start to come back into the small, faint fingers, until the child looked at her with a face that was becoming a face again. And Cora had said the only true thing she knew, the thing it had taken 30 years and a war and 5 generations to learn. You don't have to be brave. You just have to come back. We always came back. In the deep chamber Rosa stood when she came in, and the 2 old women, for Cora was not old, but she had aged that day in some way that had nothing to do with years, looked at each other across the small light, and Rosa picked up the 2nd cup, the full one, and held it out. There you are, Rosa said. There I am, said Cora, and took it and drank. In the years that followed, when the cells had grown into something the survivors did not yet have a name for, and the spires came down, one by one, the 4th one by a man who hummed his father's whistled tune, the 3rd by a girl of 15 who found her door through the lullaby of a grandmother she'd never met. The war turning not on any weapon the choir could hear coming, but on the slow accumulating fact of a species that would not stay gone. Cora became a teacher. She trained them the way Rosa had trained her, in deep chambers, with a candle on the floor. And she said to each of them what had been said to her. She told them she was not going to teach them to disappear. They already knew how. Everyone did. Disappearing was just fear with the brakes off. She told them the disappearing was not the gift, had never been the gift, even though for 30 years she had thought it was the curse. The gift was the coming back. The gift was the thing every overlooked, talked over, door left, without being noticed person had been quietly doing their whole lives without knowing it was the thing that would one day save the world. Being afraid, being unsure, being convinced you took up no space and had no right to it, and showing up anyway, choosing the harder thing on 1,000 ordinary frightened nights, coming back to hum the tune for someone who needed it. The choir had built a war on the certainty that everything dangerous announces itself. They had hunted the brave and the sure and the loud, and they had been very good at it, and they had nearly won. What they had never been able to hear coming, what they had no instrument in all their singing in all architecture to detect, was the frightened thing that did not leave the field. The doubting thing that doubted itself all the way up to the act and committed anyway. Quiet woman in the gap by the stairwell who had forgotten how to exist and remembered on a 4-note tune for exactly as long as it took. When her students asked her, and they always asked her, at the end, the night before their own runs, passing the amber bottle in the small light, When they asked her whether it ever stopped being frightening, Cora told them the truth. No, she said, it never stops. There's no such thing as brave. That's a story certain tell themselves right up until the moment they go out. She would refill the cup without being asked. You don't need brave. You never needed brave. You just need to come back. Hum the tune. It won't make you fearless. It'll just give you something to hold that isn't the fear for 4 seconds, in the one place in the world that's listening. And then she would smile, the small private smile she had learned from a woman she still missed every day. And she would say the thing that had become, without anyone quite deciding it, the only creed her quiet, frightened, undefeated people had ever needed. We always came back. It's the whole secret now. Hum.